Celestia rising. The castle had been repaired, and the last traces of Discord's reign were swept away under a coat of white paint. The new administrators and what remained of the old nobility had been sure to send out as many letters and notices as possible to inform the ponies in the far-off provinces about the new ruler in Everfree. Celestia was currently standing in a small hallway leading to the throne room, Luna behind her and Philomena perched on her shoulder. A few nervous attendants watched them from the shadows of a nearby archway, casting worried glances as if they feared the act of looking at their ruler would have them executed. "I suppose we'll have to think of a better way to reach out to the populace," Celestia said. "Give it time, sister, I'm sure they'll come around," Luna replied. "But do you think you could come up with a few ideas in your spare time?" "I'll see what I can do." Celestia smiled and made a few more adjustments to her armor. Philomena chirped a few times and fluttered her wings. "No, I haven't forgotten you." "Why do you ask?" Another chirp. "Consider yourself my icon, then," Celestia said. Philomena chirped a few more times and stroked Celestia's neck. Celestia fluffed her wings a little before approaching the door. She could hear the sound of a pony speaking to the crowd, probably to calm the populace before she made her entrance. "Just like the Imperium, Tia. Just like the Imperium." She made one last adjustment to her armor before stepping out into the throne room, light glinting off her armor as she stepped forward. The instant she had become visible, the entire throne room had broken out in cheering. While it was not the usual groups of soldiers or mobs of awestruck civilians she remembered from her last few years before the heresy, numbering only a few hundred ponies, it was a step towards familiarity that she had been missing for quite some time. She raised a hoof to quiet the ponies, and most seemed to calm down. A few zealots in the back did not get the message, and continued cheering until they realized they were alone. Now that she had their attention, Celestia began to speak. "My ponies," she began, "I wish to thank you all for helping my sister and I rebuild our nation after this time of trouble. Your dedication and love for your homeland has warmed our hearts, and we are honored to call you our subjects." More cheering before Celestia cut them off. "Still, I wish to address a few things. First and foremost, you are scared of me and my sister, you don't know what lies ahead for Equestria, and you don't know how we, your rulers, intend to guide you. So, I will take this time now to address as many questions as possible." Celestia smiled. "So, ask away." There was silence in the throne room, and Celestia could see quite a few ponies looking at each other, waiting for some pony else to speak. Finally, a colt in the center of the group mustered his courage and spoke. "We're not going to get taxed too much, right? I will not allow rates to rise higher than necessary," Celestia replied. "There may be times where rebuilding and defense may require more funds, but hopefully those will be few and far between." "That's another thing," an orange mare in the front said. "What are ya gonna do bout them diamond dogs in the south? They're stealin' all our crops and taking our families as slaves." "Do not worry, the diamond dogs may be a threat, but I have made driving them off and defending our borders a top priority." Celestia's horn shimmered and a small scroll appeared next to her. "Behold, Imperial Order No. 1, I have commissioned the founding of 20 legions to form an army led by myself and my sister. Each legion shall contain 1,000 soldiers, for now, and will come from a different area of Equestria so that they can better defend their home regions. Once they are assembled, I shall eliminate the diamond dog threat and your homes and families shall be safe." The mare nodded her thanks as several other ponies made their agreement known. Celestia surveyed the group once more, eyeing several colts in the front that seemed a bit too happy to see her. "Before anyone asks me," Celestia said, "my sister and I shall take neither mate or lover, our first devotion is to Equestria, and to place any pony before the nation would compromise our leadership." She smiled slightly when she saw most of the colts in the front slink off to the back, muttering something that she could not hear. She turned her attention back to the group at large. "Now, is there anything else I can answer?" Celestia was interrupted by the sound of knocking. She, Twilight and Cadance looked towards the door, confused. "Who is it?" Corporal Shining Armor, ma'am," a voice replied. "I was, sent here by Commander Steel Rain to guard you, or something." "So, I just wanted to let you know before I took my post. He's doing more of his deep striking Pegasi drills, isn't he? Celestia asked, her voice a bit more deadpan than she would have liked. Yes ma'am, yes he is. That explains it, he's always been a bit too obsessive about his flanking maneuvers. You may come in if you would like. The door opened and in stepped a young unicorn colt dressed in gold armor that was a size too big for him. He had a white coat and striped blue mane, and Celestia could spot a few sparring bruises that were still healing. Twilight leapt up to her hooves and ran towards Shining Armor. Shiny! Twilight squealed as she grabbed a hold of Shining Armor's leg. Twily! Shining Armor hugged his little sister back. I thought you'd be studying. I was, but Princess Celestia was telling me this really neat story about ruling Equestria. Come on, you should hear it too. Twilight, I don't think I dash. Come on. Please. It's alright if you join us. Celestia said. Technically, it would still count as guarding me. I guess I could. Yay. Twilight squeezed Shining Armor's leg again before tugging him towards Celestia. Come on, you can sit next to Cadance and me. Celestia watched as Shining Armor and Condance's faces flushed a deep shade of red. So, my niece has a crush. How cute, I shall have to encourage this. It's perfectly alright with me, as long as Cadance agrees with it. Celestia said. Oh, why yes, I don't mind. Cadance said, failing to recover her composure. Twilight beamed and pushed Shining Armor towards Cadance, the two older ponies exchanging awkward glances before he sat down. Once she was certain that every pony was comfortable, Celestia continued. Now, my sister and I had to wait a few weeks before the legions arrived. Most of it was spent doing boring politicking, which I won't trouble you with. It had been quite some time since I've had to deal with politicians directly. Why? Twilight asked. When you're stuck in a giant machine hovering near death, then it's kind of difficult to speak with any pony. Wait, I'm confused, Shining Armor said, scratching his head. What giant machine? Princess Celestia was a human and she was in this big life support thingy, or something. Twilight said. I'll explain later if you are still interested. Anyway, there were 20 legions, coming from all different regions and cities across Equestria. Surely you know most of them, Corporal. Yes ma'am, Steel Rain may be a little obsessive, but he was sure we knew the difference between an Arctic wolf and a plains runner. They were actually the first two legions to respond, followed by the Celestial Guard and the Lunar Knights. I guess you decided to follow in your ancestors' footsteps and join up. Yes ma'am. Hi. Twilight looked from Princess Celestia to her brother, confused. The oldest child in our family has always joined a legion, Shining explained. Usually it's the daughters of Maynaden, but, well, I'm not exactly cut out for that particular unit. A shame, your family actually helped to found the daughters. Celestia smiled and continued her story. Although, just because you have a bunch of ponies together does not mean you have an army. There were issues. Celestia and Luna looked at the ranks of the legions before them. Some of them took the time to get in some semblance of order, while others hung around in undisciplined blobs. Celestia sighed. Like clay I shall mold them, and in the furnace of war forge them. Celestia mumbled. What was that? Luna asked. Just something I said in similar circumstances. Come, we best make our review. Luna nodded and the two sisters crossed the courtyard to the legions. Noticing her presence, the ponies pulled themselves together and formed the best possible formations, giving her some comfort. Aside from the lack of weapons, they seem fine. Luna said. You would think that, Luna, but these ponies are no more organized than your standard band of peasant militia. No assigned ranks, no standardized weapons, not even a decent uniform. She sighed. This may take more work than I had hoped. She stopped by one group, a collection of Marays led by a unicorn with a white coat and purple mane. Who is the commander here? I am the unicorn, said Commander Dawn Sparkle of the Daughters of Maynaden, ma'am. Tell me, what qualifies you to lead a legion? My father was captain of the town guard for most of his life, ma'am. I took over 8 years ago when he was injured in combat. against griffins, ma'am, there are a few groups of rogues that harass the coast. So, you commanded a town guard. Have you any combat experience? Celestia noticed that Dawn Sparkle flinched a little. Some, ma'am. I see. Celestia used her telekinesis to grab a spear from a nearby rack. She tossed it to Dawn Sparkle, who caught it easily with her own telekinesis. Attack me. I'm sorry. Attack me, I wish to see your skills. Commander, attack me. That is an order. Dawn Sparkle looked around before nodding. Yes ma'am. Dawn Sparkle twisted the spear around in her aura before lunging forward, aiming the shaft towards Celestia's right pauldron. Celestia swatted the spear away with her hoof and struck Dawn Sparkle with her other hoof, knocking the mare on her back. Your form is too open and your footing is atrocious. Get back in place. Dawn Sparkle pulled herself back up and returned to her position. Celestia thought she heard laughter from the next rank over, and she spotted a pink Pegasus in the next group laughing at Commander Sparkle's misfortune. Wow, looks like this city mouse is nowhere near as good as she thinks, the mare laughed. Celestia walked over and looked at the mare. And who might you be? The mare composed herself before speaking. Firefly, leader of the Western Rangers. I've been roaming the woods around Vancouver my entire life. Just because you know how to run around in the woods does not make you a proper candidate for leadership. I also know how to fight several different types of carnivorous beasts and monsters. That does not make me feel any better about your leadership skills. There is more to being a commander than fighting. You must maintain the respect of both those under your command and those on the same level as you, and since you seem incapable of doing so, I'm afraid I have no place for you. Hey, it's not my fault that she couldn't get a decent hit in. Oh, and you think you could do better? Celestia grabbed the spear again and tossed it to Firefly, who fumbled it in her hooves for a brief instant. Try me. Firefly gripped the spear in her hooves, using her wings to steady herself. She lunged towards Celestia's chest, but before the spear tip could make contact, Firefly found herself lying on the ground with Celestia's armored hoof pressing on her chest. Your wings do not provide as much support as you'd think, and your hooves are poor when it comes to holding a weapons. What did you expect me to use? My mouth? Perhaps. Celestia lifted her hoof from Firefly and continued walking. She kept walking until she found another group, this one dressed in yellow and pink robes and kneeling in reverence. Your Majesty, the leader said. We are humbled by your presence. Why thank you. It is a pleasure to have you serve under my command. We are the Empress chosen, Your Majesty. You came to us all and told us of your plan for Equestria, and we have come to fulfill our duties to you. At least they're not as zealous as the word-bearers. Well, I admire your devotion. Celestia turned to the group at large. Which is more than I can say for the rest of you. You are not soldiers, you are farmers, watch ponies, clerks. You are like freshly mined iron, so much potential, yet useless at its basest form. I shall mold you into the greatest military the world has ever seen. It won't be easy, and most of you will barely be able to get by, but you will be a shining beacon against the shadows of the world. But first, Celestia's horn shimmered, and a suit of armor appeared next to her. It was a smaller version of her own, with smaller pauldrons and fewer heavy plates. You will need something to protect you. This is Mark I Centurion Field Armor. It is capable of withstanding any weapons that the enemy may have available. You will drill in several different formations to maximize the armor's effectiveness, and you will learn tactics and strategies that no other force will be able to stand against. An individualized suit of armor is waiting for each of you in your barracks, and they should be done up in appropriate colors. We begin drills in 1 hour. Drills were actually going well. It had taken a bit of time for the newly recruited legions to get used to moving around in armor, but they seemed to be getting the hang of it. Basic marching patterns were within their grasp, and they were actually capable of holding a formation for a few minutes. Combat training was an entirely different matter. For the last time, the gladius is a melee weapon, not a throwing weapon. Celestia said, bringing a hoof to her head in frustration. But how are we supposed to hold them? Asked a grey pony dressed in white armor, a plains runner. We're not all unicorns. Celestia paused before returning her hoof to her forehead. I'm sorry, I was so caught up in getting you disciplined that I forgot a vital piece of equipment. Her horn shimmered once more and a small headset materialized on the ground next to her. It was nothing fancy, just a small metal band with a tiny horn-like protrusion on the front. Put this on. She passed the headset to the plane's runner, who nodded his thanks before putting the headset on. He looked around for a few moments as if expecting something to happen, but other than a small beep the headset did nothing. It's nice, but what does it do? Pick up your sword. The plane's runner nodded and reached down to grab the sword. No, not with your mouth, use the headset. How am I supposed to dash? Just imagine that you are holding the sword. The pony gave her a weird look and concentrated, his brow furrowed slightly. The headset glowed for a moment before the sword lifted off the ground and took a defense position in front of the pony. This headset emits a simple telekinetic field, allowing for non-unicorns to pick up and handle small objects such as swords or crossbows. There should be one in the packs that came with the armor. All of the available Earth ponies and Pegasi looked into the packs and pulled out a headset. Continue with your drills. Celestia was beginning to see a rivalry developing between the Western Rangers and the Daughters of Maynaden, specifically their commanders. While normally she would not worry about it, at this stage in training it would only cause them to be uncooperative if ever deployed in the field. Especially when their commanders were on the verge of taking each other's head off. Celestia was drawn from instructing several groups of legionnaires on the importance of combined arms tactics by the sound of shouting. After picking up a string of expletives from Commander Don Sparkle that Lehman Russ would have been proud of, Celestia sighed and made her way to the source of the problem. Commanders Don Sparkle and Firefly were at each other's throats. Literally, the Pegasus had her hoof drawn back in preparation to throw a punch, while Don Sparkle had her sword at the ready. Around them a small group of their fellow legionnaires had assembled, watching and waiting to see what would happen between their two commanders. What's going on here? Celestia asked, catching the attention of all the assembled ponies. This half-blind Pegasus tried to stab me. Don Sparkle shouted, jabbing a hoof at Firefly. That's only because one of your clumsy subordinates knocked me off balance. Firefly responded, pointing to the mare in question. The daughters are not clumsy, and if you actually possessed enough intelligence and reason to understand that swinging a sword around like it's a child's toy dash. Are you calling me stupid, you stuck-up piece of dash? Firefly drew her hoof back, but before either commander could attack they were knocked over by a small-scale warp blast. Enough of this. Celestia snapped, allowing a small bit of her power to flare in her eyes. Both of you, come with me. The rest continue with your drills. The other legionnaires nodded and returned to the drills as Celestia led Don Sparkle and Firefly away from the training grounds. What exactly is your problem with each other? She asked once they were far enough away from the camp. I had nothing against her until she started calling me City Mouse and trying to kill me. Don Sparkle said, keeping her voice even. Well, that's what you are. Firefly spat. Seriously, my baby sister can do better field drills than you can. Oh, I imagine there are some other things she can do better in the field, the daughter of Maynaden said, giving her hips a wiggle to emphasize just what she was talking about. What? Come now, you spend all day in the woods, you must get bored sometimes. It took Firefly a moment to understand the insult, but once she did her glare seemed to grow more intense. City Mouse. Tree shagger. Skank. Bitch. Enough. Celestia bellowed, causing the two Marais to stagger back. Listen to yourselves, you sound like schoolyard fillies, not commanders. You let these arguments get out of hoof, it will trickle down to your legions. What will happen if one of you needs to support the other? Will you allow your rivalry to cloud your judgment and leadership capabilities? Of course not. Don Sparkle began before Celestia cut her off. Silence. I am going to say this once, you two are a threat to my army's integrity and coherence, and if you do not bury your rivalry this instant, I will kill you both with my bare hooves and let some pony else take your position. Do I make myself clear? There was silence, the two Marais looking uneasily at one another. Answer my question. Why yes, ma'am, Firefly stammered. We heard you perfectly. Good. Get back to your legions. Firefly and Dawn bowed their heads slightly and left, looking over their shoulders occasionally to make sure Celestia was not following them. Don't you think that was a bit harsh? Celestia turned and saw Luna approaching. They just needed discipline, not death threats. You would be surprised how one can pull themselves together when faced with death. Besides, I allowed rivalries like that to go unaddressed for so long during my previous reign. They sparked a civil war. Consider this cutting the head off a snake before it has the chance to strike. But then it also could foster resentment amongst the commanders. I expect my commanders and generals to respect me and take orders. I don't expect them to like me. Risky plan, sister. I hope you know what you are doing. It will work out, Luna. Trust me. She looked up to the sky and sighed. Watch over the drills for a few hours, please. I have some administration work that needs to be completed. It had started as a small complaint from one of the legions, the Arctic Wolves. Used to having brave harsh conditions and much tougher foes, they were not fond of the swords Celestia had issued as a standard weapon. One had made a remark about axes, and that had led to the current situation. I know that some of my fellows are biased like that. Commander Icewind said as he and Celestia walked down a hall towards an armory. If you find displeasure with them, I can have them dismissed. You do bring up valid points though. Celestia said. Which is why I have a special task for your legion. Oh. The two ponies stopped in a large room. In the center was a mannequin dressed in a suit of armor similar to what Icewind was wearing. Celestia's horn shimmered and a large battle axe was brought in front of the commander, who grasped it with his headset's telekinetic field. Imagine that mannequin was a pony or other enemy dressed in similar armor. Show me how you would deal with that sort of thing. Icewind took a moment to inspect the axe, looking for any structural failures. Seeing none, he swung the axe in a downward arc and struck the armor where the pauldron met the chest plate, and with a loud tearing sound the pauldron and a large chunk of the side of the armor was ripped away. I think there may be something wrong with the armor. No, the downward force you applied, along with finding a weak spot in the armor, was more than satisfactory. Why did you ask me to come here? Icewind asked, giving Celestia a sideways glance. Listen to me. There may come a time where our enemies may be as well armored and trained as us. If and when that time comes, I want some pony ready to deal with them, in any way possible. I need you to assure me that you are capable of doing such a thing. My service is to you. Icewind kneeled, the axe resting before him. I swear on my blood, that I shall do whatever is possible to defend you and Equestria from whatever threat may come against it. I shall hold you to that promise. Neither pony was aware that Luna had listened in on the last part of the conversation. Now, why would your sister give her soldiers that kind of weapon? The voice said. Luna frowned. She had thought that the voice had abandoned her when after it had spoken to her on the day of Discord's defeat, but it seemed that it would not give up so easily. Well, there is a chance that some pony might find out how to forge armor of similar toughness. Luna responded. That is what you would think, but the truth is that she plans to do away with the legions. What? Specifically the ones that are more devoted to you than her. She wouldn't do anything like that. Look at it from her position. She's a ruler who has half of her soldiers devoted to another pony. The only logical thing is to remove them, and in the end, remove you. She wouldn't do that. Are you so certain? She may say one thing to you now, yet say another thing to her commanders. I have seen many rulers go back on what they have said, and in the end it is always the same. Those that they love are the ones that get hurt, and they reap the benefits. You are certain that my sister would do that? Yes. I can't believe it. I won't believe it. My sister would never hide anything from me. She loves me and respects me. All an act to get you unfocused. Do not allow her to slip by you so easily. And no. Leave me alone. Very well, but remember, your sister does not have your best interests in mind. The voice left, and Luna shook her head to make sure she was fully focused. She turned and nearly ran into Celestia and Icewind leaving the room. Luna? Is something the matter? The older mare asked. Sorry, sister. I was just distracted and lost my way. Inside, Luna was panicking. She knew her sister was powerful, and it was possible that she already knew about the voice in her head and would call Luna out on her lie. If she inquired about it, would she invade Luna's mind to get rid of it? You know she will. She cares not for your strength or your desires. The voice whispered in her mind. If Celestia did know something, she did not make it apparent. Remember to keep your focus, Luna. You may end up hurting yourself more than you know. Celestia said before she walked past Luna, Icewind following behind her. See what I mean? I thought I told you to leave. Not now. The proof is before you, and you are still unwilling to accept it. My sister meant nothing by what she said. You're just not looking close enough. Try harder, and we will speak again. Luna blinked a few more times. The voice was getting annoying, and she hoped that soon it would learn that she would not betray her sister. But, would her sister do the same? She shook her head and kept walking, pushing all thoughts of the conversation out of her head. She knew she would have to tell Celestia sooner or later about the voice, but doing so now, with the stresses of building a strong nation resting on her mind, seemed rather impractical. I'll just have to keep this to myself for now. When the time is right, I'll tell Celestia. She was unaware that, for a brief instant, her eyes had flashed an emerald green and her pupils had become cat-like in appearance. Celestia had added crossbows to the arsenal of her legions. Most of the soldiers were not particularly good with them, and the unicorns preferred to use their powers, but the Pegasi-heavy legions, such as the Western Rangers, the Wonderbolts, the Firebirds, and the Black Ravens, had grown very fond of them. The Wonderbolts especially had started to perfect crossbow usage, with members coming up with tactics and maneuvers to maximize the weapon's effectiveness and make the Pegasus a much more effective force in combat. She watched in silence as squads of blue-clad Pegasi swooped across the sky, twisting and turning as they attempted to one-up one another. The display itself was highly reminiscent of several battles she had witnessed, and she found herself smiling at the memory. What do you think, if you don't mind me asking, ma'am? Celestia turned and saw Rolling Thunder, commander of the Wonderbolts, landing next to her. I'm impressed that you could come up with those maneuvers so quickly. Well, when I was younger I used to do tricks to keep myself in shape. I guess I just tried to apply some of that experience to this. Have you any other experience besides that? I used to lead a weather team back home in Cloudsdale. And, well, we had to break up a few mobs when Discord threw everything out the window. So you can handle groups of ponies and know how to control and disperse mobs. Yes. It's not exactly military service, but it's better than nothing. I guess. Hopefully, you will get a chance to prove yourself to me and the rest of Equestria. I would love the opportunity, ma'am. Rolling Thunder bowed and took off, rejoining his fellow Wonderbolts and leaving Celestia alone again. She surveyed the training field once more, noticing that the commanders of the Black Ravens and the Firebirds were watching Rolling Thunder closely, possibly in envy. Perhaps there are a few more snakes that need beheading. I'd say the legions are almost ready. Celestia said as she and Luna walked past the training soldiers, followed by two pairs of guards from their personal legions, the Celestial Guard and the Lunar Knights respectively. You would know better, sister. Luna said. I see that some of the legions are fairly fond of you. They are. Of course they are. You've been a bit distracted as of late, so I think you would like to know that. I guess I have been distracted. I'll try to be more focused. Do so, I do not wish to see you mess something up because you lack focus. There was a pause before Celestia spoke again. Luna, I have been thinking. Oh. Yes. You possess my strength and many of my powers, yet you are still untrained in many things in regard to keeping Equestria safe. I still hope to learn from you, sister. Luna replied, giving Celestia a small smile. I hope that I teach you well. To build upon this, I have realized that while some of the legions favor you, they are still wholly deferential to me. That's a bad thing? You are the Empress, after all. I know, but there may come a time when a legion may balk at your orders, as they do not believe they come from me. So, I have decided to appoint you as my war mistress. What exactly does that title mean? Luna asked, one eyebrow raised. At times, I may be here dealing with administration, or I may be in another part of Equestria on campaign. Under those circumstances, I grant you complete control over the legions assembled under you, your orders shall carry the same weight as mine, and the legionnaires are to follow them to the letter or face both my wrath and yours. I'm thankful for this, sister. Luna paused for a moment, bowing her head in respect. I promise you, I shall perform my task as war mistress to the best of my abilities, and I shall never back down from your service. I have no doubt that you will. They were interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, panting from having run across the courtyard. Sorry for disturbing you, Empress, the messenger said, passing her a small note, but this just came in from the southern border. Celestia opened the note, scanning it as quickly as possible. She frowned slightly before folding the note up, turning towards Luna. It looks like we shall have to put our legions to the test. The diamond dogs seem to be increasing activity and making threats. She gave Luna a small smirk. We shall have to remedy that problem, now won't we? Yes, sister.